Past players, past legends, past legends.
Welcome to our Past Players and Past Legends series, and tonight we've actually got a past umpire, Daryl Harper.
Welcome aboard, Harps. Now,
Nice to join you.
the casual 94 test matches, Daryl, from 1998 to 2011. Of course, you were on the international panel, so you were on the member of the elite panel of umpires from 2002 to 2011. We'll come back to the finish of that at some stage, Harps. So, welcome aboard.
Thank you. I don't want to be pedantic, but it was 95 tests, but there you go. That's only a number.
Blame Wikipedia for that one. Thanks, Harps. Don't worry. I will. We'll thank Grant Wasley in advance for some of these questions too. You would be worried if I hadn't done that. So yes.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, Daryl. We'll go back to the growing up in Payneham, and that. So where did your own career start as well? Playing wise, footy, cricket, the whole box and dice.
Well, it all started at a school called Wellington Road Primary School, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, it's had its name changed a couple of times. It's now Trinity Gardens Primary School.
Yep.
And coming up in this year, 2023, coming up shortly, we've got a reunion of those people that graduated in 1963. So Woz will be there. Grant Wasley will be there. It's 60 years since we completed Year 7, so that gives you a rough idea how old we are. So that's where we started playing footy and cricket in the street after school in the area. That's how we kicked off. Payneham Cricket Club used to run a schoolboys competition in the mornings at the Oval on now called Portrush Road, Wellington Road in those days, and people like Keith Duke was still about the scene at that stage, and Keith, I think was it Keith Plummer?
Yes.
Geez, going back a long while now.
Yeah.
But those guys got us started. Grant Wasley, myself, and another guy by the name of Lyndon Hurst. We were a bit of a terrible trio. We played our cricket together at school, after school, and whenever we could. And that's how we kicked it off.
Be remiss there not to give Keith Duke appropriate recognition, Pete. Keith was an Australian record of 62 consecutive years as secretary at Payneham, which is why Payneham Cricket Club are called the Dukes. Very smart man, thought of that name too, by the way, Harps. Yes.
Oh, did you? Right.
Yes. So,
yeah, great guy.
Then at Nord High, Harps.
Yes, Grant Wasley and I certainly went straight up to Nord High after primary school, and we played our cricket for Nord High. I can't actually remember too many coaches apart from one. One would have been Johnny Wildy, who was a West Torrens cricketer, and he was our maths teacher, I think, in matric. And at the same time, we tried out for the Kensington Schoolboys, the January Schoolboys Carnival, and discovered we lived in the East Torrens zone. So we very quickly rerouted our methods and went down to Norwood Oval, and we all joined East Torrens as a district cricket club in about in our second or third year at high school, and onward after that.
I admit I was going to lead to that because I wasn't sure if Pete knew that East Torrens Nord Oval used to be East Torrens' home ground.
Absolutely.
So, yes, playing at the home of football would have been a buzz, Harps.
Oh, a huge buzz! Not only the home of football, the mighty Redlegs, but also the home of night baseball.
Yes.
I was there so many times each year for certainly every Wednesday night for the baseball, and then eventually for the cricket. We practiced on there and played on there a few times, and also of course to watch the greatest SANFL club of the last 150 years.
Correct.
No bias at all there.
No, not at all.
No,
with any of
none
us.
at all.
What was your baseball involvement, Harps?
I played 2 years at Nord High School, and I was coached by a fellow by the name of Dick Shirt in one of those years. Dick Shirt was a left-arm pitcher from Sydney, quite a wild man, a bit of a wild man, but played for Australia. I always loved the baseball, especially after we were introduced to the game at Wellington Road Primary School by a group of Mormon missionaries came to school and wanted to teach us this new sport, and we went out to practice a few times, but we sort of shied away when they wanted to come into our homes and speak to our parents about religion. Yes. So we lost a little bit of interest, but we certainly went to Nord Oval all the time. We just loved the baseball, and it's a game that's always fascinated me, and I still follow it extremely closely today. I was recently down at West Beach when South Australia or the Giants managed to win their 2 games in the final series to bring home the Claxton Shield.
First time in 43 years. I will say, in terms of the Mormons, I will give my brother-in-law Edward recognition. He did let them in one day and then locked them in and said they'd listen to him. And you should see they actually avoid the place. They cross the road. They go nowhere near the place. It was brilliant. He got rid of them for life.
So you reckon that's the key, you reckon?
It was superb.
Yeah, might have to remember that.
Yes. So then starting off at East Torrens, did you start at Payneham or East Torrens, basically there?
No, I only played with Payneham on the Saturday morning stuff, but
yep.
I started off in the East Torrens, the 4th team, and I was an extremely good C grader and quite a good B grader and a very, very ordinary A grader who went into the A grade side to take someone's place when someone was promoted to the Sheffield Shield team. So, I wasn't the greatest of cricketers, but I was certainly an extremely keen one. And I always made sure I knew all the laws and rules of any games that I played.
We might have that in common, Daryl, I think.
Yes. I have ended up, over the years umpiring Australian rules football, basketball, cricket and baseball as well. So, I left no stone unturned to find something I could do reasonably well.
Because you got injured with football, didn't you?
I did. I strained an Achilles running around, trying to push myself up the front of the pack in training one year, and I had to drop out of the footy, and I reverted or switched across to cricket umpiring, which is something that I'd already dabbled with as a student teacher, and I loved it. Umpired for the next 28 years.
Who did you play footy for?
I played footy for Wattle Park Teachers College in amateur league. We played in A3. And then I went to the country teaching, and I played for Port Macdonald in the Mid-South East League, and came back to the town and just played a couple of casual games for the Murray Park CAE, and then I switched to footy umpiring. I had a back neighbour who was umpiring seconds footy, and it sounded good, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the travel to places like Pirrie and Augusta and Lincoln and over to Kangaroo Island, and even the little places like Snowtown and Blythe and Clare and all that sort of run. It was a great. It made Saturdays really interesting to cover a couple of 100 Ks and umpire a game of footy.
And of course, you played at both Teachers College and University with cricket, didn't you, Harps?
No, I didn't play at uni because I never actually went to uni. In those days, you had to be a uni student to play for them. I only went to Wattle Park Teachers College where I got my teaching diploma and advanced teaching diploma. So I never made it to uni. I just didn't make it.
Read wrong. Now, there was one thing. Apparently, you were one of the very, very first people to use a helmet.
I was actually. That's a good story to tell.
Bit of research, Harps. Better get one right.
I got cleaned up at Price Memorial one day by Jeff Kowalik, actually. I had the temerity to try and hook, and this was in a B grade game for East Torrens, and I hooked quite successfully, and I'd actually made 99 in the first innings. Got caught off the glove of a leg spinner, and the umpire was sharp enough to pick up the touch, which I was pretty disappointed about because there was no way I was walking. I wasn't a walker.
No, I did have that in front of me, 99 at Hawthorn, so there you are.
Yeah, and in the second innings, I got to 56 and I was cleaned up and carried off unconscious and woke up in the change rooms. And I was most disturbed when I came back 4 or 5 hours later, having had my mouth stitched up inside and out, to discover that I was actually given out hit wicket. I would have thought at the time that once I got cleaned up, it would have been a dead ball and it would have been retired hurt. But no, the bowler got the credit for that. I was disappointed.
Yeah, McCosker, centenary test. Yeah, could argue on that one. It's probably a little ambiguous the way that rule's written.
Yes, well, some laws you can read them a couple of different ways, and I would always read them the way I wanted to.
Okay, so then moving on, and obviously, moving up the ranks with umpiring and the influences with umpiring with Mel McGuinness and others.
Yeah, right. Well, as a youngster, Mel McGuinness had married one of my mother's cousins, a very close cousin who actually lived with my mother for a period of time, and Mel McGuinness was umpiring his test matches in the 50s, and I always headed over to his corner when we had a family function, a 21st or Christmas or some sort of wedding celebration. I'd always be keen on listening to his stories, and I always had it in the back of my mind I wouldn't mind trying a bit of cricket umpiring. And Yes, away I went. So I umpired a little bit of cricket in the country where the umpires aren't provided. Loved doing it. Uh, Played a couple of seasons for the Coromandel Ramblers in Adelaide and Suburban. Once again, umpiring whenever I wasn't batting. And I thought to myself at the age of 31, this is something I'm quite enjoying, so I'll take it on properly. So I went out and discovered that I was probably 10 or 15 years younger than anyone else in the room. And I did hesitate, wondering what I was putting myself into, but I later realised that it was actually an advantage only being 31 because, a lot of the umpires actually remembered me from my playing days. I played at East Torrens 2 years earlier than that, so there were a lot of familiar faces, and I was lucky enough to be nurtured through the grades fairly quickly and into the first class ranks, and then I was away for doing the Shield games for quite a number of years. So I was very fortunate.
So it's safe to say umpiring was always on the horizon, but really didn't take it seriously until you got into it in a big way.
Yes, well, it would also be honest of me to admit that I was one of those people that always made the umpires earn their money, whether it was when I was playing basketball, cricket or football. I always had plenty to say. I always had a good knowledge of the laws, and I always...
Starting to sound like me a bit again, huh?
I was known to be a bit too talkative, so people were a little bit surprised when I took it on, and knowing my history of being a loudmouth, but I managed to turn it to advantage and control myself, and knowing how much I'd given umpires a hard time, I guess in a way I was prepared to accept a little bit because I'd handed it out. I had to be thick-skinned enough to accept it. So I always felt that my ability to sort of build relationships with people on the field or off the field was always going to be an advantage. And being a primary teacher, you're always dealing with parents. Some visiting nights, just interview times regarding children's welfare. There's always a relationship to develop, and something I seem to enjoy doing, and did it reasonably successfully. So that's a major asset that I think if you're going to officiate in a game, you've got to be able to deal with people and deal with them in a fair and even way.
When you obviously got into umpiring on a bit more of a serious basis, did you see yourself umpiring at the top level someday?
No, heavens, no. I certainly did not. I guess I was umpiring A grade in my second season. And then I started to get a couple of games. I did an Australia versus India under-19 test match at the University Oval. When I say test match, it was probably a one-day match. And that was probably in my second season. And I thought, gee, this is interesting. There were a couple of...
What year was that, Daryl?
I'm thinking it was probably about 84, 85. Around about that era. Yep. And there were members of the touring party with the Indians, a couple of the coaches whose names were memorable to me. They'd had careers in the first class or the test or the one-day arena. There wasn't much one-day arena at that stage. It was just developing, but they were names that I recognised. And I suppose I got a bit of a taste for it, and I thought, this could develop into something good. So when I got the opportunity, I certainly grasped it with two hands.
And made your first class debut in 1987.
Yep, that's right. I started off with a game between South Australia and New Zealand. And if I'd taken the advice of several of the New Zealand players, that would have been my final game of umpiring.
Let me guess, go forth and multiply?
Well, Ian Smith behind the stumps, he thought I should try tennis umpiring because he'd seen Memorial Drive over the back. And, yes, I think Martin Crowe was probably a little bit harsh when he offered me the cricket ball. He actually said to me, you better keep this, son. You'll never get another game out here. And I misunderstood it. I was thinking that he was being negative, but I think he was meaning that I was destined for higher things. That's how I interpreted it.
Good man, the late, great Martin Crowe. So then you made your test debut in 1988 with umpiring with Venkat.
Yes, that was exciting. I went to Perth 3 times that month. It was November 90. Was it 98, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah, 98. I went there 3 times. First to do a West Australia versus England game, one of the tour games. Then I came home. I went back and I did a Shield game between West Australia and Victoria, and then I came home and I went back and I did a third game at the WACA in the same month, and that was my first test. So that was pretty good preparation. I felt pretty comfortable about how the ball was going to bounce and move around, and it was all over in 2.5 days. Australia cleaned them up. Dizzy Gillespie took wickets. Damien Fleming took wickets.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And 2.5 day test. I thought, gee, this is all right. Sheffield Shield games go for 4 days, and here I am, 2.5 days, and the test's over.
Especially at Adelaide Oval, they always went for 4 days then. So.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So yeah, that was an interesting start with Venkat, who turned out to be, probably one of my less favourable partners. Venkat wasn't very good at offering signals to his colleagues on the field, and in Australia we've always had a system of working as a team, and I discovered at the very highest level that didn't always apply. In umpires from certain nationalities just worried about their own end, and they weren't interested in giving assistance, only in getting assistance. And unfortunately, Venkat was one of those people.
So there would have been communication difficulties with some, just language. Was there any?
No, I can't say there were no communication difficulties. Yeah. All the lads speak pretty good English. I mean, Aleem Dar's still going around years and years on. He's one of the more difficult ones to understand, to be honest.
I thought.
But no, he makes himself clearly understood. No drama.
And then the elite panel came along.
Yes, well, first of all, the National Grid panel was there. That's initially what I was added to. There was a panel of about 24 umpires, 2 from every Test playing country and 4 from England. And I took the place of Steve Randall, who unfortunately ended up being incarcerated for some time. So I was nominated to take his place, and that was an interesting nomination because there were 7 or 8 other Australian umpires who had umpired Test cricket, and I hadn't umpired a single Test when I was appointed to that panel, and that kind of guaranteed me a couple of years of Test cricket, which I had not experienced until that moment. So, I think I umpired 5 or 6 games in the next 12, 18 months. And then in 2000, that was 1998, 99, and then 2002, April the 1st, we started with the ICC Elite panel, and I was lucky enough to be the only Australian on the panel when it certainly commenced in that year.
And you're one of the first umpires of the trial of the player referral system as well.
Yes. Are you talking about the DRS?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, can I just clarify? It doesn't really stand for the Darrell review system. Someone put that rumour out. It actually is the decision review system, and not the Darrell review system. However, yes, I was bitten by that. It was poorly planned when it was first used. It was extremely poorly planned for example, in a series in South Africa with England playing there, because the third umpire was only, in the Caribbean earlier, rather, I should say, the third umpire was only able to view the ball until it made contact with the batsman's pad or his body. And you had to decide whether the umpire's decision was correct, not knowing or not seeing the projected path of the ball. So you give the on-field umpire your best opinion. He'd make his final decision, and the rest of the world would then watch 10 seconds later while the projected path of the ball was shown, and it didn't always match what we'd anticipated it would happen. So that was fraught with danger the first few years of the DRS, but it's turned out to be a pretty reasonable system.
We almost got stitched up effectively by, in some regards, when England lodged a complaint, when they had, as you said, they had better vision than what you did. It's quite ridiculous, really.
Yes. I was watching and listening to the vision and sound provided by the local broadcaster, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and the England boys in the change rooms on the other side of the wall next to me were taking the international feed, and it basically revolved around Graham Smith edging a ball from Ryan Sidebottom, and umpire Tony Hill from New Zealand giving him not out. And when I saw and listened to the replay, I had to confirm his decision is correct, because there was no vision of the ball changing its direction or the seam changing, and there was no sound. However, in the rooms next to me on the international feed, yes, they had a sound. They didn't have vision, of course, because it didn't exist, but they had quite a clear click, and he should have been given out. Graham Smith went on. He was 15 runs at the time, and he made 100, and I think that enabled South Africa to at least draw the series and certainly not lose it. So it was quite controversial. There was an 8-month inquiry.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it was called the Lockie Lloyd inquiry. Lockie was some sort of a legal eagle from Scotland, tied up with the ICC, and Clive Lloyd, of course, was the eminent former player and then referee. And after 8 months, they confirmed that all the decisions I made in that game were in accordance with the regulations and the protocols, and I did absolutely nothing wrong. And that was the end of that. So I was cleared eventually, but it took a long time.
Were you ever asked for any feedback on how you could have made the system a little bit better?
Oh, I had plenty of advice. I usually gave that. Yes.
Whether they listened or not is another thing.
Yes, well, at that stage, the third umpire was watching on a screen provided by the home board, and that could have been the same one that you had in your back room at home, whereas the players had larger, more high-definition quality viewing and sound. They had the best sound and the best viewing, and we were using makeshift equipment, and the same thing was happening here in Australia. It was a long time before the quality of the equipment matched the quality of the cricket.
So go through some of the umpiring highlights then, Harps, because
umpiring highlights.
Yeah.
Well, here's a strange one. I was the first umpire in the world to umpire test matches at 50 different venues.
Wow.
So for a start, you need to umpire
Yep.
50 tests, and there are not a lot of people that have done that.
Yep.
Aleem Dar has since gone past me because he's still out there on the park. I think he might even be in New Zealand doing the current test. Highlights, I did a World Cup semi-final in South Africa in 2003. I umpired the final of the 2009 T20 World Cup at Lords with Simon Taufel and Steve Davis as our third umpire. And the only reason we could do that was because Australia didn't make the final. Yeah. So that was a highlight, umpiring with the Aussies, and being there for the final. It's always a thrill to umpire at Lords. Lucky enough to do 3 tests there as well. Look, to be honest, there were lots of highlights. A lot of them were just simply conversations. There were moments, not so much the decisions. Of course, there were decisions that raised a little bit of interest from time to time around the world. Certain things happened, and people interpreted in the way they wanted to. For example, the 1999 only Adelaide test I ever did was.
I was thinking, I reckon you might bring this up. Yep.
Yeah, well, everyone else does. If I get in 10 taxis, Malcolm, 8 of them will be driven by Sikhs.
Yeah, I still reckon it was out.
Yeah, so do I. And out of those 8 Sikhs, 4 of them will turn around and say, "You're Harper. I know you. You gave out Tendulkar." and we'll talk cricket all the way either to home or to the airport, wherever I'm heading. And a couple of them will finish the journey with a selfie with me. So the interesting thing about India, and I freely admit this, I have never, ever been abused by an Indian person. Sure, the journos might have written some harsh comments about me from time to time, but I've never actually been confronted and spoken to in a rude manner by any Indian on this planet. They are an incredibly respectful nation. They love their cricket. We think we're fanatical. We're not. Nothing
like
compares to India. And they are so knowledgeable. They are extremely knowledgeable, and they have an opinion, and they love to talk cricket. Honestly.
You don't receive Christmas cards from Dhoni, though, do you?
No, but he doesn't get any from me either. No, he was just a tough competitor, Malcolm. He played it hard, and I did my job hard, if you like. You're probably referring to the fact that he was captain, and when I umpired my final test, it was my 95th, not 94th, by the way. And he did have a few harsh words about me, but I did become only the. I did ban one of the bowlers, Praveen Kumar, I think it was, from bowling after running into the protected area, and it just happened that only Kumar and Ashish Nehra were the only two Indian bowlers that I was ever able to discover had been banned by an umpire because they ran into the protected area. And it just happened to be the same umpire on both occasions, about 11 years apart. Look, I don't know. I played it hard. He played it hard. And, hey, 95 was a good number. I thought, number 96 would have been good. Would have rung a bell with the TV show I used to watch.
Exactly.
But in the end, I chose not to umpire the final test in that series, and instead I was in Philadelphia watching the Boston Red Sox play the Phillies.
Hey, you're right up my alley there. I can tell you right now.
Don't worry, I was going to bring that up with Pete there. Pete's but your career did have a bit of a bizarre ending, Harps. Let's give out as much as you want to in that regard.
What, you mean Harper's Bazaar?
Go for it, Harps.
Well, Malcolm, the interesting story was that in May of 2011, I read in an article supplied by the ICC media department, I read that I'd been sacked from the elite panel. And I thought it was a strange way to find out. It was an article in the Sunday Times of Sri Lanka coming out of Colombo. Anyway, 5 or 6 hours after I read that article, David Richardson, who was the chief at the ICC based in Dubai at the time, rang me and started off with a little bit of small talk, and then I quickly told him that I'd already read the article and what was the story. And he apologised that I'd found out that I'd been sacked in that regard, but he assured me that they were looking to add some new blood to the panel, and I was the last of the original 8 actually, so the other 7 had all gone, and I was the last survivor, and they decided to replace me with a younger guy, but. It was a strange way to find out you'd been given the sack. And then it was strange that they still wanted me to umpire 2 tests that they'd appointed me to in the Caribbean. But there was no way I was going to miss out on those once they said, no, we want you to fulfill that part of your contract, because I already had plans to watch the Red Sox in Tampa Bay and the Red Sox in Philadelphia, and I didn't want to muck up those plans just for a game of cricket.
I like the way you think, mate.
So I went ahead with the cricket and I enjoyed the baseball.
Now, it would be remiss if you didn't give your better half a plug too, Harps.
Which one? You mean my colleague at the other end or out at Square Leg? Will you be talking about my wife?
I thought you better give your wife a mention, Daryl. She would. She'd have a crack at me if we didn't.
She what?
She'd have a crack at me justifiably if we didn't.
Oh well, yes. Well, she often has a crack at you anyway.
Yeah, true.
No, we just had our 50th wedding anniversary, actually, Malcolm, last month.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks. Something's working. For 15 of those years, I was probably out of Australia for 8 months a year. So it was a strange connection, a strange relationship, but I did make sure that Maureen travelled with me somewhere every year whenever I went away, and I encouraged her to resign from her teaching role a year early. And she travelled a lot more with me in my final year, or what turned out to be my final year. I was thinking I might have gone a little bit longer. I was always aiming to try and make the century, but anyone that saw me bat knew that I didn't make hundreds very often. So no reason why I should with 100 tests.
Now, we better... I'm glad you've mentioned that, Ton, because I can assure you that Woz would quite rightly have a crack if we didn't mention you did get 100 down Mount Gambier, 104 at Mount Gambier, and also your best bowling figures. It's something else we have in common, Harps, 8 for 48.
Yes, well, I got that against a team called Yahl, YAHL, which is where Sleepy came from.
Yes,
yes. There were no Sleeps in the team at that stage. Yes, and I did enjoy my country cricket because I ended up, basically being the captain and the coach, and I was the number one umpire. If I wasn't batting, I was out there in the middle umpiring. I'd much rather do that than sit and score. Or I realised that the guys I was playing with were either fishermen or farmers. The same in my football team. So most of them had got up early to do their day's work before they got to the footy and the cricket. And me being a school teacher, all I'd done was probably slept in and had a late breakfast. And these guys, they loved their sport. It was a great outlet for them, and they loved to chat. And I've always enjoyed a chat, so I think I fitted in pretty well down in the southeast for 3 years.
And of course, Port Mac also is the home of Froggy Murdoch. So
yes, and I think a couple of the Murdoch boys might be playing in a a fundraising game tomorrow night at McDonald Park in Mount Gambier.
Right.
That being around about the 16th or 17th of February. There's a fundraising game going on, and there's a couple of Murdochs, and I believe there are a few AFL players playing. A former Collingwood AFL player by the name of Davis, Leon Davis, is there.
Yep.
And also one that's covered in tattoos is also fronting up for a game of footy.
Dane Swan.
Yeah.
Dane Swan. And I believe he's also fronting up for Nang Warriors' first game in another month. I'm not sure how they've signed him on, but it's a thriving sporting area. They love their sport. And this fundraising football game is actually for a sad cause. It's regarding headspace of especially young men down there. They've unfortunately lost a few in the last year or two.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make something positive happen with this footy match tomorrow. So I'm heading down to support it.
Good to hear.
Mate, I have to ask, just going back to your umpiring and obviously all the grounds you umpired at, was there a favourite ground that you enjoyed umpiring at, not only from the ambience but also hospitality and the players?
I mean, I was once I started, I really wanted to umpire a test on Adelaide Oval, and I got that in that India test. That's the only one I did. I did 7 in Australia, and then I couldn't umpire in Australia anymore, so I did 88 overseas. But 7 of those I did at Galle, the southern tip of Sri Lanka. Is a beautiful fortress on the headland. And right down on the southern tip of Sri Lanka. It's a beautiful location, and the sea is visible around the fortress, and it's a pretty little ground. I remember my first test was there in the year 2000. I umpired with Peter Manuel, a local umpire, and honestly, I came off and I was absolutely exhausted. The amount of spin that Murley and his cohorts were getting was just phenomenal. I remember saying to Peter, this is not the game that I've been umpiring in Australia. This is like a different sport. In the first session of play, there'd be 4 fieldsmen gathered around the batter, and they would all be within spitting distance, and the ball would be turning at right angles, clouds of dust coming up every time the ball pitched, appeals every third delivery, it seemed. Yeah. It was a really hard workout. But I umpired there before and after the tsunami.
I was going to ask that. Yep.
Mm. Yep. And I believe 160,000 people perished in that area, or very nearby, and it was devastated. The fortress only had one entry, and that was on the land side, the inland side, and anyone inside the fortress was actually quite safe. The tsunami swept by on 2 sides and just completely swamped the cricket ground, possibly to 10 or 20 or 15 feet. It was a massive wash. There was an English schoolboy cricket team about to play. I think it was 9:25 in the morning, and they were just about to go out on the field when the alarm went up, and they all scrambled into the grandstand and got as high as they could. And I believe one of the English lads had a father who was still sitting on the team bus, and that bus was just swept away. Wow. And I'm not sure where it was discovered in time later on, but 160,000 people perished. But those people were just so resilient. They love their cricket down there too, just like they do in India, and they're very respectful. They're always very colourful. There's chanting, there's singing, there's drums, there's music going on all the time, and it's just an exciting place to be, especially if the Barmy Army happen to be in town with the English boys, and then you actually get to hear your name come up a few times in the Barmy Army song. But so Galle is my special place. 7 test matches. I did enjoy it. The groundsman there came to me the first day with a bottle of Jacobs Creek Chardonnay. He knew I liked the white wine, and I umpired 7 test matches. Every single day of every single test, he would arrive after stumps with a bottle out of his fridge of Jacobs Creek Chardonnay. So they looked after me pretty well, and I really am still very, very fond of that place and those people. I've got lots of wonderful friends there.
No, fair enough
and,
too.
And a local wine too. He did his research.
Yes, exactly. I was there when Murley played his last test. Murley decided with 792 wickets, he was going to play 1 test against India in the 3-test series. He was looking to get the 8 wickets to take him up to the 800. In the first innings, I think he took 5, and he was looking for 3 in the second innings. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, good, Rod Tucker will be able to look after him this innings. I had him for most of the first innings, and after 2 overs, I was most disappointed to see Murali come off, and he switched ends and came down to my end, and he did eventually snare the last 3 wickets he needed, and fortunately the last one was caught in slip by Joe Wardner. It was Ojha, the tail ender for India, and he had the 800 wickets, and the test was over. The test was over. Sri Lanka needed 75 runs to win in the 4th innings, and Murali retired with 800 scalps. And I realised, looking back, I'd umpired him in 21 test matches, and I'd seen him take 120 of his 800 wickets. So,
and just think,
very interesting career.
If umpires had been supported more and the rules hadn't been changed, you wouldn't have umpired him at all, Harps, effectively.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I umpired him in Adelaide in my second ODI in 1995, and I reckon it was the West Indies versus Sri Lanka. And 11 days later was the Boxing Day situation where Daryl Hare did call him for throwing. And I honestly can't actually remember whether he bowled at my end or I was at square leg in that ODI. But I do have a very positive recollection from that match. I'd waited nearly 2 years between my first ODI and my second. And here I was fronting up on Adelaide Oval, West Indies versus Sri Lanka. And there was a run out. And I looked across at the non-striker. And the non-striker was a great big tall guy by the name of Roger Harper.
Yes.
And Roger comes from Guyana, off-spin bowler, great fieldsman and middle-order batsman. I'd never met Roger, but he was standing there after a run-out, and I attracted his attention. I said, "Excuse me, Roger, but there's 2 Harpers up on the scoreboard. That's pretty unusual." And he glanced up at the beautiful Adelaide Oval scoreboard and worked out what I was talking about and looked back and just nodded. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, well, didn't get much of a reaction, but at least I got a reaction. So I said, do you think we might be related? and Roger thought about it for a few moments, and he replied in a voice that sounds to me like he was doing a Barry White imitation, a beautiful, deep voice. He said, maybe if you go way, way back. And from that moment onwards, wherever I saw Roger Harper in the world, because he did continue to play and he also coached Kenya, he would always greet me with a high five and say, "G'day, cuz." I managed to break the ice in a nice way, and we always had a good relationship. So, that was a positive memory from that second ODI way back in '95.
Other favourite memories then? Any favourite players?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Favourite players, gee,
or best players? What you thought?
Yes, there weren't too many people that I didn't like. I mean, cricket's a game that sorts out the wheat from the chaff. I mean, if you're going to play cricket, you've got to be prepared to hang around and field for a day, and perhaps not get any runs or not have much of a bowl. So, there's only a certain type of person can actually survive in cricket. So there's a lot of good people, but one that always impressed me was Irfan Pathan, the left armour from India.
Yeah.
Irfan was a young bloke. I do recall he took a hat-trick in the opening over of the only India-Pakistan test I umpired in Pakistan. Pakistan was 3 for 0 when I walked in from square leg, and they were 6 for 39 at drinks, and they ended up winning the test by about 325 runs. It was quite a bizarre test. But it's a great memory. But young Irfan was playing one day, and he was fielding at square leg near me, and he said, "Harper," they usually use your last name, "Harper, do you have a family?" And I said, "Yes, mate, I've got a son and a daughter, and they're probably both about your age. How old are you?" And he said, "I'm 18. I said, "So is my daughter." "Oh," I said, "Are you single?" He said, "Yes." "Is your daughter single?" "Yes." So we thought about it, and the game went on. And a year later, I might have seen him in Zimbabwe or South Africa or England, and the conversation just continued for 5 years. Is your daughter still single? Yes. Are you still single? Yes. And I eventually introduced them to each other in India when my daughter was backpacking around. I think we were in Ahmedabad for a test match, and she came in and they were introduced to each other, and I think they were both highly embarrassed because this had been going on for years. And then later on, I read that he'd married this beautiful Bollywood princess. And the next time I saw him, I told him how disappointed I was because he had been my retirement plan, and that had gone up in smoke. But no, lovely lad. But I remember the conversations I had with people and the warmth and the friendship you have on the cricket field, probably a lot clearer than I do the individual performances. I was there when a lot of things happened. I was lucky enough to. Well, I was unlucky enough to be in India when there was a horrible terrorist attack on Mumbai.
Yeah.
And we were playing a game of cricket over on the far east coast in a place called Cuttack. And England had lost the first 4 ODIs to India, and this was the 5th of 7. And as the batsmen came out to take up their position at the fall of each wicket, there'd be a new story. Someone would say, well, the terrorists have attacked the Towers Hotel, which we'd been occupying a week or two earlier. And then they'd attacked the railway station. And as the night wore on, the story got worse. And by the morning, we discovered that 164 people had been killed by these terrorists. And the English boys decided they would head home. They wouldn't play the last 2 ODIs or the 2 tests. So they took off. I came back to Adelaide, and I'd only been here for about 24 hours, and I got a call to say that the 2 test matches were going to be played in different venues. They were going to play the first test down in Chennai, down in the south, well away from Mumbai, and then the other one was going to be up in Mohali. And would I like to come back for them? Well, I hadn't even emptied my suitcase, so I obviously loved doing the job I did, so I said yes. I went to Chennai, and there was a very emotional game with masses and masses of soldiers and police at the ground, more military than spectators. And India won that test on the 5th afternoon when Tendulkar brought up his 41st test century with a little clip down to the leg side boundary, fine leg boundary. And India had won the game, and it was a nice fillip for the nation after, the brutality of 164 people dying. So, yeah, I've got lots and lots of wonderful cricket memories. And I just look back and realise how fortunate I was to take up that job and lucky enough to do it reasonably well.
So if you had to rank batsmen, Lara, Tendulkar, or an Australian of your choice?
I think I'd always have to put Sachin first. He was very, very special. And as part of the specialty of Sachin was he was just such a lovely, quiet, humble guy. When I gave him out in controversial circumstances in that Adelaide test, he was actually the captain, and I know for a fact that that decision didn't rate a mention on the umpire's report. So he had to fill in a report on the 2 umpires, and that one wasn't even worthy in his mind of commenting upon. So he was a very fair guy. In years times after that, we would have discussed that a number of times, and it was always very amicable. He was a very easy bloke to talk with. I do recall on the morning in Cuttack, with all that brutality and death over in Mumbai, which was his home city, I do remember him coming over to me at the breakfast table to find out, how I was handling the situation. He was cool and calm enough to care for someone that was a visitor in his country when all that brutality was happening in his own city, and he must have had family and friends that he needed to be checking upon. So I thought, that speaks volumes for the quality of the guy.
Now, Daryl, one other thing, a little bit from left field, you were an ambassador for Arana, an Adelaide company providing employment for people with disabilities, and knowing you, Harps, that's something you would have loved to be involved with.
I did. I only did that for a short time. I think I might have been one of their first ambassadors, and it was fascinating to go and visit some of the workshops and some of the sites where they had people employed. The spirit of those people was just fantastic. I did one tour of a number of facilities with John Swan, Jimmy Barnes' brother.
Yep.
And he took his guitar with him, and he fired away and played his guitar. and the workers at each of the venues that we stopped at, they were having a break, and they came in for a bit of an impromptu concert, and honestly, those rooms were really buzzing with excitement and appreciation. And I did. I thoroughly enjoyed being an ambassador for Arana. That was a lovely gesture they made to invite me to be that. There is one ambassadorship that I'm still very proud of, Malcolm, and I probably don't need to tell you that it's one with the certain football club, the mighty Adelaide Crows.
Yes, with the Crows, but I think I'd prefer the red and blue involvement.
Yes, well, I'm a staunch member there.
Yes.
I'm just as passionate, if not more, about the Redlegs. The Redlegs don't play overseas very often, and I did notice that the Crows were going to play in Dubai in 2008. And I looked on the cricket calendar and discovered that the West Indies were touring South Africa. And South Africa's not all that far from, well, it's on the same continent, the same line as Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
It's only an 8.5-hour flight difference. But I worked out that if I could umpire that series, I could get into Dubai on my way home to see the footy, Crows versus Collingwood 2008, about the 4th of February. So I put in a request to my manager asking if I could do the one-day series in South Africa. And he very quickly reminded me that we were appointed independently. We couldn't request games. It was a matter of waiting to see what we were appointed to. But he inquired, why would I want to go to Dubai? Why would I want to go to South Africa? I said, because that'll get me into Dubai to watch the Crows play Collingwood. He is a Kiwi. He doesn't work at the ICC anymore, but Doug immediately said, well, that's a good enough reason for me. You can do the series. So Maureen accompanied me. We did the 5 one-dayers around the 5 big centres in South Africa over a 2.5 week period. And all the time, our focus was on the flight that took us from Joburg back up to Dubai. We rocked up on the first day we arrived in Dubai, went out, found the Crows were training at the police academy, and went out and, we've always been passionate Crows supporters, and we still are. And I was lucky enough to be made an ambassador.
Well, hopefully they have a pretty good year this year for you, mate. They're tracking on the right direction.
And we could always talk about the Redlegs grand final win from last year for another hour or so, Harp. So that'd be easy.
I've got my ticket to go and watch Fortis. I hope you're doing the same.
Yes,
I
Good. have.
I'll see you there.
Yes, you will. Look, Daryl, greatly appreciated. Fantastically reminiscing memories. Look, I admit I probably... you do still hold roles with match refereeing and all that, and I've deliberately left out the current situation in here because I personally, so I'm not speaking on behalf of you, thought what happened with their preparation of the first test pitch was unforgivable and disgraceful, and I thought I really better not get you to comment on that for your own good. So that was quite deliberate, Harps.
Oh, thanks for that.
Yes.
I am still employed by Cricket Australia,
exactly.
so I do have to be cautious, but...
Yes.
Perhaps I'll include that in my publication when I get it out, following in your footsteps with your book.
Thanks, Harps, yes.
Thank you very much, Daryl. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I certainly learned a few things there, and it was fantastic to hear some of your stories.
Oh, thanks a lot. I always enjoy sharing them. It's, I look back and I still shake my head and wonder how lucky I was to be just in the right place at the right time and find something that I enjoy doing. Just comes from having a passion for sport and especially for cricket. And little did I know when I umpired my first game, it would have been the Shell Shield in around about 1968 when I was at Teachers College. I certainly didn't realise or didn't even envisage that I'd go on to umpire 95 test matches. So, in the right place at the right time, and I loved what I did and still enjoy what I'm doing. These days I select umpires for the BBL and the Sheffield Shield and the Marsh One Day Cup. So that's my involvement. I don't referee anymore, but I do. I am actively involved in encouraging the umpires.
Well, mate, you've been a great ambassador for not only South Australia, but cricket umpires all over the world, I'm sure.
Thanks, mate. Good on you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harps.
boys.
Appreciate it.